How the fuck is everybody doing in this bitch? I'm Dirty B, and before we get started, I do have to share this out, but I hope somebody's watching because I actually have special for you. Let me check and make sure we got anybody in here. See if there's anybody been in this bitch. Okay, we got some motherfuckers up in here. Alright, check this out. I'm about to show you something real dope. In order to do so, which I do have to share this out some more, so while I do so, I'm about to show you something cool. We have a theme song, or we have an intro. Like a semi-professional one. But let me know how everybody's doing in the comments. I'm about to show you guys some dope shit that I've been working on. I think it's pretty dope, and with the help of Knight and a bunch of other people that's been behind the scenes just helping me get my shit together. Here we go. But here's the new thing. Check this out. Without further ado, my bad, I just wanted to get everybody up in here. Alright, so what's up, everybody? I wanted to come on here and fucking shout out everybody that's fucking been hustling through all the garbage lately. I know it's been kind of tough for some people. For me, it's been pretty 50-50, but I've been getting a lot of release by working on what I'm about to show you guys tonight. So please help me share this out because I think you guys might appreciate this. Yeah, so by the way, if anybody was wondering, my fucking phone's like completely fucked, so it just, it's trash. But anyways, tonight I'm about to play you guys some of this new shit. And this is Enox. So this is a story that I came up with when I was about 16 years old. And, when I was like 20-something, I had enough ideas written where I thought I could make a comic book. And I made like 5 editions. And then, after a while, not having really like the oomph to do it. And I decided, fuck it, I'll just put it down for a minute and think about it some more. And I did. And over the last, 2 or 3 years, I've been, listening more to novels because, reading kind of gives me a headache now, actually reading. So, and plus I take information better when I listen to it. So, for the last couple of years, I've been really cracking down on getting everything, you know what I'm saying? In my head, how to write things. I've been paying attention a lot more. So hopefully this translates well, but check this out. So it gets a little choppy in the very beginning because I was trying to figure out the proper mix or whatever. But these are all rough. This is not the end, but check this out. So this is the prologue. Check it out.
In the current age, not many have heard of the Council, for there is an alien race brought into existence by necessity. The universe, striving for balance, manifested this life form to monitor the ever-growing vastness of life. In rare moments, the Council has had to eliminate or delete a civilization due to mass genocide and great holocaust brought up on life by dominating alien races. One such civilization, for reasons unknowable, went without notice in their treachery. Scores of millennia before their ability for warfare, an alien race called the Nexus discovered a great mineral, a metallic substance able to hold certain energy frequencies stable within it. They derived from these great metals to forge masks. Masks that not only connected their consciousness, but also their network of knowledge and communication abilities. Before the introduction of this element in their society, life for them went on without end. In their most primitive form on the evolutionary path, they were like great worms with arms that resembled that of a great ape. Headless, their body was, tadpole-like in appearance, starting large and wide at the crown, tapering off to a thin tail at its end. Due to the strong gravity on this planet, not many forms of life could manifest. Being the only intelligence in the solar system, they began a search for knowledge. Not long into their scholastic endeavors, they stumbled upon Nexium. Once the masks made contact with their porous cold skin, a connection was made from metal to veins. In result, after the lapse of many thousands of years, their frame and bulk would become immobilized for all eternity. Suffering from immortality, they are destined to be cased in their greed forever. Because after the mask is placed on a chosen war beast or devout soldier, the mask would bond with bone, seeping into the skull of the mask bearer. After the span of a various number of years, depending on circumstance, it grows, first over their skull, then throughout the veins of their neck, till eventually, after making its way through the muscle fibers, it meets bone. For shortly after the introduction of this technology to their hierarchy, they soon began a battle for resources. Generation after generation of warlords ruled the many houses of Nexus. No liquid besides small pockets of liquid methane. Nothing but great rolling plains of black rocky hills covered the planet's landscape. In the year 10,890,789, before the earthling known as Christ was killed, came what Nexians named the last days. The final Nexium ingot was smelted. Apprenticed to the exalted King Zaxxus Zornus, Lord Mortimus rose to power. Mortimus was born, as are all Nexians, every 21 revolutions around their star. On the 21st sol, the planet comes to its closest passing to its host star, pulling from its core the element that comprises the magnetosphere. Natural deposits of Nexium ore coursing through the planet's great veins also give birth to a seed, which under the light of their 7 moons begins to crack and splinter 29 days after its breach of the crude soil, hence ushering forth another would-be ruler of the galaxies. Being a child of great wars and collapses of civilization and prosperity, only knowing the violence of invading warlords and their disgusting legions, for only a chosen few were made to be above the subjugated. There are the chosen apprentices and acolytes of the warlords, usually chosen for their most brutal traits and terrible attributes. Mortimus, however, was chosen for an entirely different reason. Despite his ability to be ruthless, cunning, and powerful like most his race, he displayed an unquenchable interest in the why of things, the how of things. Instead of reenacting the treachery and barbarous acts of his predecessors, he chose to seek and exploit one's weaknesses, to bend one to his will, rather than be manipulated or dominated by aggressors. To the point that one day his master Zaxxus looked upon him with a curious eye. Time after time, situation after situation, foe by foe, land by land. His ability to bask in the spoils of war and conquest, due to the help of Mortimus, made him realize he was the future. The path to conquering all the lands, which becomes reality in the span of less than 1 sol. He made such a giant display of his victories by casting the surviving soldiers of his enemies' armies into the depths of space. This act caused every warlord on Nexus to devise a strategy to finally destroy the tyrant ruler. Foolish with their haste, before their armies could properly gather and mobilize. In a vain attempt, they combined their power and years of deadly experience in warfare to guide them to death. For Mortimus was no fool, and watched the ways of his clan, and in the sacred graveyard, where all Nexians in their last day went to become statues of eternal life, breaking the traditions and customs of his race, conversing with the never dead, frozen Nexians with neglectful predecessors, or the forgotten masters of a slain general, spending days in friendship, or the torture of many of never dead. Some welcomed his presence and were grateful for any conversation to pass the endless time behind, present, and ahead of them. Others shunned his inquiries and strange requests. Then he replied with the sound of clinking metallic rock against the steel-like stone of the hollow ground that was the foundation of the sacred graveyard, echoing out in the ugliest of tones to this alien creature's sense of hearing, which would roll and bellow in their inner skeleton, now fused with the Nexium, causing discomfort to most of the still inhabitants of the Meadow of Forgotten. From these strange conversations and interrogations of the never dead, he developed knowledge of the ways of the old ones. For most knowledge is known to all, stored in a vast network, almost as if it's woven into the strange alien metal, having the quality of what on earth they call the internet. But also each individual mask acting as an email address to this alien internet. In what the Nexians refer to as the last days, Lord Mortimus, with his great knowledge of warfare and ancient tactics, refined by millions of years of implication before him, destroyed the warlords of Nexus, not in cruelty, not in anger, but in necessity. For after the death of the warlords, quickly depleting the planet's reserves of this material, in desperate order they created a weapon, similar to a bomb, only different in the fact that after detonation, all matter in the blast radius is transmuted to the metal they covet, named Nexium. In the almost 2 billion years of this race's existence, its best minds and greatest wealth of resources, they never were able to find a cure to their one most important plague as a race and as a civilization. Having been capable of anti-gravity after a few million years of using electromagnetism and other fundamental forces unknown to mankind, they sought after the stars, and conquest after great conquest, they wiped their own solar system of life. But during this, they encountered many opposing life forms, unwilling to just die at their command. Once in a short and helpless war against one of their neighbors, they discovered the existence of the Council and their purpose, and that if ever made aware of their killing and destruction, uninvited by engagement of war or any other provocation, they would, with their infinite power and knowledge of the cosmos, pluck from existence the very memory of Nexus. Its people, past and present, would be but a cloud of dust in the black void of space, drifting ever asunder, remembered by no one. For they never made friends with other aliens or made trading routes with other galaxies. They only obliterated every planet's surface that they came across, leaving only its moons, because its surface is not sufficient enough to mine the proper amount needed to refine their synthetic Nexium. Study after study, testing every hypothesis, they were never able to develop pure Nexium like found on their planet. So with knowledge of the Council and the pursuit to cure their blight, they left no witnesses to their atrocities. And how the aliens he conquered gained this knowledge, Mortimus never found out. But since the day Zaxxas bestowed the engraved mask upon his skull, he knew his purpose: to bring his people immortality and God status in this pitiful universe, masters of its life and shaper of its will, only answerable to the Council, which through great cruelty and genocide never learned of his actions and remained unaware of the Nexian menace. Lord Mortimus, on his throne of blood and secret wisdom, gazed out onto the Milky Way galaxy, drifting in the black void between galaxies, unaware of the passing centuries that lie ahead of his journey. 100 years to a Nexian, even cursed as they are, is like a month to a mortal man. During his great journey across the nothingness, propelled on a craft crushing space in front of it, expanding the space behind it, warping the universe's fabric in such a way, no effect of inertia is felt upon their strong muscle and dense tree trunk-sized bones. In his thoughts, Mortimus thought of the times before the Great War he was born into. There were tales of a time of great wealth, expansion, religions, freedoms, and exploration. He heard tales of the first great worms, before they grew their arms that gave them the eventual strength to manipulate their surroundings. Times where they didn't spend their vast years making tools and crafting monuments. Since sprouting from the soil, they were driven toward exploration. At first, the highest plains and peaks of the four mountains dotting their dark horizons. Then the caves, caverns, and hollows of the depths, unlit by the alternating purple and dark blue shades of the lunar illumination. Before this accursed metal consumed its planet's great children, only losing one's life to great accident or on rare occasion, murder. In these times, they were more in key with their nature. The Black Hills, nightly illuminated by dancing violet and ocean color rays. Mortimus also heard times after these great freedoms, when the first clans formed, in peace and harmony before the bloodshed and domination of one another. When they worshipped Ubo Safla, dweller in the aurora, basking in the cold light of their divine moonlight. They felt the cold comfort of Ubo Safla's embrace. Now that conquest and harvest are their people's only drive, they faded from the light, traveling the stars to conjure and provoke agony for this disgusting metallic parasite. In the year 2027, the Nexians, after a prolonged period of victories or uneventful transmutations of vacant surfaces, these were the first planets they encountered in the Milky Way. Proving to still be of no use, their scientists demanded more of the substance. They arrived just behind the Earth's moon, leaving behind them countless worlds, some that bore life, some that were but barren wastes in the depths of space. Sacred and hollowed out, harvested for metals created on those alien landscapes. Having come to Earth with the same method in mind, they did not foresee what was to unfold on this blue marble in the heavens. Maybe after all this time, it's fitting. Mortimus comes to Earth to start the beginning of his end.
Hey, Knight wasn't lying, bro. I might have to owe him after this one. But yeah, man, that was the prologue. That's not even really the story. That's just giving you an idea of Mortimus and the struggles he had to go through to destroy his own world and many others just to fucking get to Earth. And yeah, so you're about to meet Richard Ronan in the next chapter, my main character. Enox, I'll let that happen when it happens. I ain't gonna ruin that for you. Enox has a separate meaning, and it's not from the Bible or anything like that. But anyways, how do you guys feel about this shit so far? I mean, I know there's a couple of things I might have to go back and tweak, but so far you guys got a good layout of what happened, right? Because these next ones, I feel like the farther they go along, the better they get. You know what I'm saying? Like I crafted a little bit more. You'll see. So I'm gonna play the next chapter right quick. So some of them are shorter than others. Not all of them are that long. I had to pack a lot of information into one prologue. So, anyways, so here we go.
On this bright, hot summer day, sweating in the sunlight, Richard Ronan, contractor for the U.S. military and ex-Special Forces operative, finds himself doing the thing he dreaded most in his career, the behind-the-scenes work. He spent too much time on the battlefield and in the drama of war. Not that he's violent by nature, the opposite can be said. Born with a warrior's heart, he's always stood up for those who never stood a chance. Joining the military felt like the right path for a young Richard, seeing how he had no siblings to look after or up to. In his military career, he found importance to violence when necessary. Lost in thought, his daydream was shaped into a nightmare. Covering the ground and enveloping him was a shadow. A strange mass partially blocked the rays of the sun, showering down glittering metallic objects that to the naked eye seemed to be tumbling debris at first glance. Upon further inspection, he noticed a pattern to their falling, how it almost seemed rhythmic and in tune with one another. In midair, almost a mile above the Earth's surface, the falling ovals stopped, hovering in place for a short moment. With a strange, elegant silence, they gracefully descended, lingering for a small moment, before plopping onto the earth with a thud. Richard felt a wave of reverberation echoing across the land beneath his very feet. For a brief moment, it almost seemed to his perception that the ground was liquid. Like waves from the ocean, layer after layer of earth crashed against his body. Looking up to see no great plume or massive detonation, he saw no source of the blast, but he braced himself with his forearms in an X shape. Attempting to shield himself from a shockwave, he leaned forward into the torrent of energy rushing at him. Simultaneously below the surface, less than a mile from his location, underground was a military bunker with one of the most brilliant minds on the planet, Dr. Kevin Starr, world-renowned for his magnificent invention. A gelatinous substance that through a certain process can cause the gel he named Unidium to become 12 times harder than diamond. In the process of designing a spacecraft capable of holding 1,000 cryogenically frozen occupants, 20 staff, 2 crewmates, and a captain on board, due to the science needed to calibrate a good position to launch, first and only of its kind, this was an exploration arc. While he was nose deep in a heap of wires, his devices warned him of an anomaly approaching. Not knowing what the protocol for such a thing would be, he did what he thought was right, ordering the military presence and science officers alike on board Galaxa 1. Sealing the door, he activated a switch on the console, followed by a quick prompt to a computer terminal, the twisting of a key, and the press of a button. And just like that, the entire craft that was coated in the gel not 2 days ago was transformed to its solid state. Above them, Richard, through the narrow slit of his eyelid, chanced one more glimpse in the direction of the sun. At this moment, an inward flux of energy almost staggering Richard off balance, pulling him inwards and pushing back with the opposing forces. Following a brief yet unending 3 seconds of eternity, an indescribable force was unleashed in every direction at once, obliterating everything we humans built, named, inhabited, and visited. Every soul that roamed the platforms of stone above the ocean, every memory of man from creation to destruction. With an unyielding hurricane of destruction, life as we know it was halted from existence. These bombs, lacking an actual explosive payload, propelled a wind of energy in a frequency that washed over and manipulated his DNA, causing every cell in Richard's body to bond with Nexium. Once complete, his skin slipped off like a shredded jumpsuit. His muscles glistened in the muted sunlight, despite the odds, after an unknowable number of civilizations have fallen victim to the Nexians. This one man stood in, according to the laws of physics, the perfect spot. Instead of being converted into inanimate Nexian ore for alien harvester machines to pluck from the ground like ripe fruit, he stood in a spot between 2 blasts that merged his DNA with Nexium on a molecular level, making his bones hard as granite, his muscles that of titanium bands. Stripping him of his human flesh suit, he was left naked on the metallic wasteland, amongst lifeless, frozen comrades and civilians, falling in and out of blackness. Before succumbing to sleep, he looked around at the frozen life around him, almost like someone hit the pause button. Some unaware, some staring upwards with a saluting gesture, blocking the radiance of the sun. In a state of blank denial, disbelief, rage, and confusion, Richard awoke, gaining balance after a few attempts. He stumbled endlessly, driven only out of muscle memory, back in the direction he considered headquarters. Below the surface, unaware of the only survivor on the Earth's surface, Dr. Starr and his team made preparations to escape. From his observation deck on the ship, he fittingly named the Lexicon. For the first time in what he was pretty sure was their entire history as a race, Mortimer saw indicators of movement on his display, before any surveyors or harvester drones were deployed to the planet. Upon closer inspection, to his great surprise, he saw the stumbling man. The lead Nexicon science officers bursted into his chambers. Excited, they shouted demands in their weird dialect. Demands to gather the specimen for further inquiry. How such a thing could be possible, if this was true and one survived the conversion process. Surely he's immune to the curse. Foolishly, in a plan to learn all there is to know without engaging the specimen, he crafted a mask out of the last remaining ingot of Nexium. Releasing it from the bay of his ship, it fell to Earth. The mask, through the air, spinning for miles, until eventually slowing down enough to fall. With a light ping, the sound of the mask slid to a stop shortly in front of him. Startled, Richard lifted his gaze to a strange glimmering skull-like mask. Stumbling forward, falling to his knees a few times along the way, he reached down for the mask. Suspicious, even in his confusion, mostly from the years of military awareness, maybe just from the strangeness of the whole event, he found a dented, thin strip of scrap metal, doubtlessly a loose piece of debris from some nearby car. Looping a strand through the eye hole, the mask was firmly secure on his belt line. 20 minutes or so after walking long enough for his equilibrium to return from autopilot. Once on his feet again, he looked down at himself for the first time, screaming at the image. It wasn't his sunburnt German Native American skin he was looking at. It was a series of woven strands of metal flowing through, over, and around his bones. Not the calloused fingers of a man with time tattooed on his flesh, absent of life's graffiti. Nothing of his anatomy was left. They were someone else's hands, something else's hands. Fading from his thoughts, back to reality, he looked up to see the ominous presence of the lexicon. The sun, now an orange cloudy disk obscuring the dust of a broken planet. In its greatness and glory, the lexicon resembled a dark stone dagger, with a blade adorning each end. Red veins of pulsating light periodically panned from center to surface, like blood being pumped through living veins. The lexicon descended into the atmosphere. Looking down to the hellish wasteland moments ago he called his home, even as far as he was away from his actual place of dwelling. Instead of being safe in a bed of his own purchasing, he was warped by loss, looking at a planet full of once vibrant life, snuffed out as easily as a candle in a hurricane. Going about life 1 second, unaware today would be the last. Metallic soils of war the next. Pausing to examine the alien offering in his possession, he noticed a bunker hatch opening not too far ahead of him. In the distance, he heard human voices shouting. Making out the silhouette of a few soldiers, he called back out to them and started with haste in their direction. Upon approaching the door, he plunged forward, unconscious, taking most of the impact on his shoulder. The two men, with great effort, muscled Richard's body onto the medical examination table. Shaking his head in disgust, puzzled yet grateful to find another survivor, he began cleaning the putrefaction from his metallic muscles. Mortimus, in his cruelty and brutality, didn't know how much they took from Richard, how much humanity they stripped from his surface, how much hatred they galvanized inside his heart. In his slumber, a dream struck his sleeping mind. He was in Japan, visiting a good friend he served with. Remember that time? When we almost died? Which time? Kenzo said sarcastically. Korea, fool. When we were heading up to the roof of that dusty-ass old building. Can't believe we thought it would be a good sniper nest. Warm laughter consumed the room. Slightly annoyed, Richard continued. Soon as we got up there, you had to shit. I thought I was gonna die laughing when that beetle crawled up your pant leg. Man, every op in 3 miles of us heard that shit. If we didn't bring that extra clip for that M4, we wouldn't be laughing about it now. I swear we had to have been shooting at random muzzle flashes for hours. My index finger hurts just thinking about it. Kenzo curled his lip in one corner and tried to hold back the laughter for a short period. He failed. In the middle of taking a sip of water after relaying his story, his look made Richard spit the contents from his mouth and burst into uncontrollable laughter. That same night you farted in the trench, I damn near puked on your socks. It's hard to crawl when your abs hurt from dry heaving. What made you Kenzo stopped talking. Richard, confused, looked over. Kenzo, like the people around him in the blast, was cold and stiff, unblinking, Richard screamed at the sight of his friend's transmuted expression.
Boy, yeah. So shit's about to get deep. Shit gets fun though. It has to be grim at first. You know what I'm saying? You have to, you have to go through some shit before you can actually start making some shit happen. Because this shit's about to get a little bit more funner, especially the stuff I've been writing lately. Because right now I'm on I'm looking at it right now. I'm on the 12th chapter I'm working on right now. But I have, that was part 1. There's 3 more I have. And if you guys are down, I'm about to crack into them. So that way, so we do is chop it up afterwards. But I really hope you guys stick around, because I had a lot of fun writing this, and I hope you guys enjoy this. And Knight, he killed this shit, bro. But I started using, instead of creating things for the background, it got too tedious. I started using other fucking like royalty-free stuff for backgrounds. But I did, add my own sound effects to it and stuff, and mixed it properly. But anyways, so here we go. Part 2. Chapter 2.
Shortly after awakening from his momentary loss of consciousness, he was greeted by the bright white flare of a flashlight. Sitting up a bit dazed, he realized he was surrounded by survivors. Voice low and crackling, Richard started to speak, interrupted by Dr. Starr. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Starr. Dr. Kevin Starr. You're Richard, right? We found your dog tags fused to your chest plate. You must have been one of our support team. You're on Galaxa 1. What happened up there, man?" After a brief conversation, Richard offers the mask to Kevin. Upon examining the mask given to him by Mortimus, he quickly deduced it was transmitting some type of detectable signal. After experimenting with a few tools, he was able to reroute energy from one part of the mask, shutting off the outward flow of data. After forming this closed link within itself, the mask stopped humming. Richard didn't notice that before. On Mortimus's observation deck, once the mask was offline, flashing lights and alarms started to fill the chamber. He scrambled drones to investigate the wreckage and retrieve the human. Less suspicious of the strange object, he, for no other reason than to get answers, put on the mask. Instantly and without warning, like a magnet, it snapped to his skull, because his whole body was next to him. Instead of a violent tunneling of bone and leaching of metals into veins, it bonded with the very molecules of the mask. A rush of knowledge flowed into his conscious, like a dam of pictures and emotions. In the space of a few seconds, Richard knew he had at his fingertips knowledge of which no human had ever witnessed. A part of the flowing knowledge was a branch titled Harvesting Locations, having mental access to maps and grids shaped in his mind. As easy as opening a file on a computer, he could see their current operations taking place in real time. Richard knew it was now or never. Knowing that the facility they were in was a spaceship capable of withstanding the planet itself exploding, he beckoned for Dr. Starr to begin departure procedure, improvising a method of escape. They came up with the idea of detonating a payload of explosives meant for deep space geology in their wake. Using this as a distraction, they exploded out of the cloud of collapsing Earth, barreling into the sky and bending over the curve of Earth opposite of the invading alien ship. The Galaxa 1 at mind-numbing speeds ripped free of the embrace of Earth's gravity, setting sail towards nowhere, for there was nowhere to go. No place humans called home, other than the one they just left. It could be months or maybe years. One there was certain. He knew as well as Mortimus did. This wasn't over. There is no escape. Just the chance to live and fight another day. No plan, no idea in which direction they should go. Richard started going through the mass databases for possible solutions. Meanwhile, once on ground, the investigation drones detected no signs of life. Mapping the area, the surveyor detected the giant chasm where the Galaxa 1 once rested. Reporting back to the ship, this result was unacceptable to Mortimus. For the first time in 6,700 years, he left the confines of his ship to see with his own eyes the fate of this lone survivor. Cure to their curse, remedy to their plight. Richard is the answer Mortimus did not even know he was looking for. Domination and prosperity of Nexus life was his only goal, with the possibility of Nexus everlasting invading his thoughts. He was blinded to all others, for this was his destiny, a divine purpose. Maybe those tales from the old worshippers of Ubo Sathla were correct. Is it possible their omens and premonitions were of reality? If so, this human must be captured, by any means necessary. When he got to the crater left by this explosive distraction, he noticed it for what it was, a diversion. In a state of pure hatred and vile determination, he made for his ship. Like one shook by the threat of death, Mortimus slammed open the door to his threshold, slammed himself in his seat, tail slipping into an opening at the back of the throne. He bellowed out his commands, reverberating throughout the entire ship. His voice brought about swift movement and hushed whispers in its greatness. Meanwhile, on the Galaxa 1, Richard found a map in the mask's internal data inventory. The map showed results from a survey drone sent to scout the galaxy hundreds of years in advance of their coming. On this map, marked planets of varying sizes, compositions, and distances from their host star. Some even with attached information on the chemical makeup and gravitational forces. A strange property unknown even to the Nexus is that the mask bonds wholly with its wearer. Using this abnormal attribute, the mask quickly translated alien languages and numbers into something more recognizable. Better able to understand the language the mask was allowing him to access. He scrambled through the facility to find the captain's bay. Once on deck, he pulled up their current map of the galaxy, pointing in a vague area around one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way. What's out there? We're not going to last more than a few years on what supplies we had on board. It's a planet, maybe not livable, but it seems the right size, and to be in the right spot, give or take. Besides, this is the closest neighboring star in this direction. The question is, can this hunk of metal make it all the way there? Smirking at the last comment, Dr. Starr replied, "You can plunge head on into a planet or moon in this thing and not even need a seatbelt. There's gyro sensors and a shock-absorbing frame. This baby's just short of indestructible. If we're going to have any issue, it's going to be with speed. There's just too much space between us and there. At this rate, it will take us 19 years to get there. According to all our trials, at best, this arc might function for 5 years without cycling out the air supply and purging the hydration system." Coming up on Mercury, at the last minute, Kevin thought of a solid plan. Using momentum gathered by slingshotting around the sun, they cut through the universe at blinding speeds, thanks to their gravity assist, in hopes this planet can be used for refuge and to collect their wits, maybe even get a realistic plan in motion. Checking with the staff on board and confirming no one was injured in a hasty getaway. Brave as the men were, the loss they suffered was enormous. Even though one of the observation portals facing the direction they came from was no sign of the once blue jewel of the cosmos, only a dark black husk resembling the shape and appearance of Earth. Like the still intact head of a cigarette in the ashtray, the broken soulless planet stared back with its cold gaze, known to the Nexans as Sol 897 Gal 002. They left before they could even begin to harvest their garden of grotesque. Thankfully, the project was in its final stages before its departure. 900 sleeping inhabitants were on board. Cryogenic capsules hold the last of the inhabitants of Earth. Dr. Starr and Richard volunteered to see to it that all the pods were safely stored after guiding the leftover staff inside them. Preparing for a long journey, Dr. Starr and his 2 children, Douglas, aka Zero, and Laura, which were also decorated soldiers. The older sibling, Zero, was paralyzed from the waist down due to a training accident, an unfortunate accident that happened after his last combat deployment. Douglas spent his remaining Earth years overseeing security detail on his father's many government-funded contracts. Being his son, it was easier to ensure Secrecy was upheld on his various projects. Also, to keep his son close by, he felt guilty of his son's condition. Following the role his family all abided by, he went down the military path. His daughter Laura, a highly decorated Marine, spent her last days on Earth celebrating a long career and eventually was promoted to sergeant. There, on both personal and business, she was consulting her father on the Art Concurrent project. After they were in their pods, Dr. Starr assured them, "When you wake up, I don't know what it will be like, what will be waiting for you, but I'll be here, working tirelessly to find a way for us. We'll make it like we always do. Now rest. I'm sure we're going to need your help when we figure out our next move." Sealed in the wall of pods and safe, Dr. Starr departed the stasis room, back to the grim company of Richard. He didn't know what to say to the man. He knows he was handling all this pretty well, for how crazy the situation is. Soldiers can stay calm and cool in some hairy situations, but his reaction wasn't proportionate with the severity of things. A few days passed, and after hours of examination and days of observation, they came to the conclusion. Every part of his anatomy was infused fully with this metal, Nexium. That's what those aliens call it, said Richard, once while slicing away a piece of melted rubber from his back. Kevin went for a pair of hemostats, and Richard's hand, like it knew exactly what he wanted, retrieved the instrument without hesitation and passed it to Kevin. Startled, they both looked at his hands somewhat confused, shaking their head and returning to the task. They paid it no mind. For a time afterwards, Richard had a strange awareness of his surroundings. Having only been on this craft for a few hours, it's like he knew every corner of the places he's physically been so thoroughly. It seemed as if he was the design's architect, even down to the composition and decay rate of all the elements it was comprised of. He realized the mask was recording everything. It's learning as he progresses, every movement, tone, sound, color, sight, and action. Learning and storing data as it's receiving it in the form of unquestionable knowing. Every bit of information was at the front of his mind. He remembered in order and detail every tone, down to the key and pitch, every word said to him since he first put on the mask. Telling Kevin about his revelation, they decided to try putting it to the test. Dr. Starr asked Richard to walk the length of the entire craft, which was more than a quarter mile in length and several city blocks wide. Ending his stride, he reported back to Dr. Starr, "Not only can I draw a map of the electronics that run through the walls and floor, I don't know how it's possible, but I also noticed a few minor flaws in the design. I have an idea for a few improvements." Walking to the supply cache, they were silent, but were thinking the same thing. What does this all mean? What's next?
Oh boy, and next shit gets real, because they might or might not find a place to go get their shit together, and these things might not be fully not human, if you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying? Who knows? But yeah, I hope you guys are liking this so far, because this is kind of embarrassing to play. But yeah, no, I'm having fun, I ain't gonna lie. And Night's making it even funner just reading this shit, right? I mean, there's some stuff we're definitely going to have to fucking touch up, but it's so fun, man. It's so fun. But anyways, here we go. Let's get to, we only have 2 more chapters left, and this next one, this is chapter 3. The title for this one, I think, was called New Eden.
After months of searching, a promising planet was found in a nearby star system. It was named New Eden, and preparations were quickly made to colonize it. Not sure what New Eden had in store on its unexplored soils, but waking up all the sleeping travelers would surely be disastrous. Deciding instead to wake them up in units, to explain the tragedy that fell upon their world. None of them took it well, but as humans, they did what they've always done: accepted and moved forward. No sense in drowning in sadness for a situation lacking a solution. So once a short briefing and sometimes emotional breakdown, they made their first steps onto the damn grassy patch at the base of their ship. The journey to New Eden was long and arduous. The survivors had to endure years of travel in cramped quarters, facing countless challenges and dangers along the way, along with dealing with their own inner turmoil, for no one survived unscathed. Forever in their hearts and minds will live this day, when they lost everything and began anew in this cruel universe. The months they weren't in stasis, they spent awaiting the final approach, impatiently and paranoid at the possibilities. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at their destination. A beautiful green and dark blue sphere shimmering under their observation window. As they stepped out of their ships onto the alien soil, the survivors were filled with a sense of awe and wonder. New Eden was a beautiful planet with lush forests, towering mountains, and sparkling oceans. It was a world that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Even its gravity was suiting to the new arrivals. Only a 0.25% increase in gravity. They were easy to adapt to the oxygen-rich environment. But as the survivors began to explore their new home, they quickly realized that it was not without its dangers. Dr. Starr and Richard laid down the foundations to the first human outpost. The creatures of the land chittered and danced in the swaying daylight, behind the veil of trees just beyond the clearing. Richard, in the months leading to New Eden, has gotten used to this state and even begun exercising and testing its limits. During this time, he discovered he didn't lose any mobility or strength. Now it's like he was never winded. Every movement was mechanical precision in its nature. So looking out into the wilderness of New Eden, noticing the quite menacing presence circling their camp, he took a step forward, tightening his fist. "Show yourself!" Once he cried out, he was answered by a chorus of whispers. Chancing it, he braced himself, leaned forward in a runner stance, and bolted into the alien woodlands. Upon first breaching the forest perimeter, instead of being met by an ambush, he is greeted by a singular being. The short, painted humanoid, proving to be a shaman, put his hands up in placation. Trying to give off a non-threatening gesture, the creature slowly, with his hands raised, approached Ronan. Still suspicious, Richard lowered his hands from his head level to his collarbone. Once both were in a calmer state, the shaman began to speak. Strangely, Richard understood him. The creature went on to explain that they were the first aliens to land on their planet, and that their race and all visitors to their ports are friendly and know not of conflict. For in this star system, of the 7 species here, none have fought their neighbor, learning how to trade and build a vast network of culture and religion for their collective. They've strived for thousands of years, making peaceful bargains and connections with one another. Richard tried his best to explain their circumstances, but almost like the words were alien themselves, the shaman just could not understand the concept of a tyrant dominating others. He didn't fully believe in the words and treated the story as if it was a fable or myth. In the millions of years on the evolutionary chain, this civilization not once, if ever, experienced war. Famine, greed, thievery, and murder were unheard of in their society. After a brief peaceful talk, Richard returned to Dr. Starr to report. "I don't think the life forms here are hostile. They've asked us to accompany them to their village." Hesitating at first, the weary travelers, eager to free their mind of the plight prodding at them, decided this was better than waiting impatiently on the Ark, and with this thought, started anew. These alien strangers, as they were, accepted them with open arms to the ways and traditions of the land, shared with them their technological and biological secrets and methods. Together, despite the challenges, the survivors thrived on New Eden for the short time this transition took place. They built homes and communities, planted crops, and began to live their lives in a world that was completely different from anything they had ever known. Over time, the survivors learned to adapt to their new home. They studied the planet's unique ecosystem, learned to communicate with its creatures, and even began to develop new technologies that allowed them to thrive in this new world. As the months passed, the survivors realized that they never truly found a home on New Eden, forced to leave Earth behind. They never thought they would find something resembling home, just as full of wonder and just as full of hope. What they didn't know is the Nexus is spacebound again, unrelenting and preparing to unleash horrors that this star system couldn't fathom. Mortimus, unaware of what direction to even start looking for them in, sent forth an army of surveillance drones, like a crowd of angry locusts. They swarmed in every direction. It's been almost a year and a half since they first departed from Earth. Mortimus, contemplating their escape, thought about his grim gift to Richard. Foolish as it was, he followed the train of possibilities. He must have escaped our plans somehow. If that is true, the thing saw our maps. We must double our efforts if we are to locate this pest. During his time on New Eden, Richard discovered that his body had more ability than originally he accepted, impervious to sharp weaponry, and after careful examination, it was shown to be resistant against kinetic energy weapons as well. His mind was like a complex archive of Nexian war data. He remembered every second of training, every sentence he's ever read, every movement he's ever made, engraved in his muscle memory, reignited and made available to him by the mask. Now firmly bonded with Richard's Nexium skull, he trained diligently, not knowing if he was ever going to have to use his newfound abilities. On an oddly dark day on New Eden, under the light of the planet's second moon, a vision struck across Richard's consciousness, blinding him to the world around him, tearing him into a memory of something else's past. In this memory, he looks down at the dark, shiny, wet soil. Stains of yellow on his viscous, slippery lower body was the remains of what he knew to be his egg. Looking up to a high cliff, he was aware of a shape backlit by moonlight. Standing perplexed on the edge of the cliff, it was a statue. Resting on a coiled serpent-like tail, adorned a heavily muscled, scaly bulk with sinuous arms and writhing tentacles on its crown, with a bloodshot eye fixed at the end of each tendril. Still, as it was, the voyeur knew those all-seeing extremities were once alive with motion, swimming in the air, periodically flopping forward to blink open one disgusting eye at a time, each eye peering into a different time or dimension. He knew, in his heart of hearts, this was Ubo Sathla. Before Richard could make out any further details, he was pulled back in his body just as quick as the memory came. After regaining himself, he looked about, noticing his body was enveloped in green flame, dancing spirals that licked the air with the audible buzz. Shortly after realizing his condition, he also notices that his feet weren't touching the ground. He was levitating. He felt no force of gravity on his body. What was this sensation? Just as quick as he noticed his weightlessness, he snapped back too, falling to the ground, dissipating all the energy around him. Richard was left with an adrenaline rush, the likes of which he's never felt before. Still tingling, he looked up to the bewildered faces of his comrades. This was only the beginning exploration into his new powers, and already he found a small taste of an unknown reservoir at his disposal. Exploding from walls of dust and plunging forward through dark matter, silently, the lexicon rushes through space towards New Eden. Richard knew this to be true. He felt it in his very bones. Lifting his head, he gazed into the direction he felt Mortimus. He's coming. We must prepare.
Boy, and it's about to go down, son. Dude, this is fun, bro. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know about y'all, but like, I'm kind of glad that it's kind of sounding like cohesive. All right, so we have the last chapter. Now this is the last chapter that's voiced, but there's more to come. Expect this project. I don't know when, but sometime in a year or so. It's gonna take a long time to get done. I'm not gonna stop until at least 40 chapters. So it's gonna be a long fucking one. You know what I'm saying? It might have its own YouTube channel. I'm definitely gonna drop it on all platforms. So, but anyways, this is the next chapter. This is chapter 4. This is the last one for you guys for the night, and then we'll get to cracking and talking some shit. But check this out. Here we go.
With a loud boom, the lexicon enters the atmosphere of New Eden. Only knowing about this threat and having only a few weeks to prepare for their first war, Richard Ronan has been in a state of constant training for a month now. Not sure of his new abilities, his training mainly consisted of being as mobile as he once was. In short order, gaining insight that his body had more secrets to bear. Something inside the soldier filled him with a brilliant confidence. Nervously, he clenches and unclenches his fists. Once the lexicon breaks the cloud barrier and is fully visible, the improvised weapon systems prove to be up to par at first, impacting exiting drones and causing a firework-like display in the skies. Too many to counter, some of the drones made their way to the surface, proving to not be empty vessels. When they struck the surface, they opened with a clinking release of metal, spilling its contents onto the makeshift battlefield. In the time they had to prepare, Richard and Dr. Kevin Starr designed strong native steel armor. Still clutching their Earth-made guns, a loud battle cry shrieked out from the gathering militia. Giant towering pillars dropped from above, slamming into Edenian foundations, reverberating through the square, collapsing buildings in its wake. After this short period of destruction, the pillars began emanating green energy, almost like a shot of adrenaline to the heart. Once the green energy made contact with Nexian flesh, the alien warriors fell into a berserk rage, slashing and disemboweling rushing Edonians. Richard, in the 10 seconds that passed since all this drama occurred, had been weaving in and out of battling aliens, dodging deadly blows, and curving under and around laser fire. Focused solely on the lexicon, Richard made eye contact with Mortimus through his observation deck's window. Becoming one with his rage, he doubled his efforts, blazing towards the lexicon like a bat out of hell. Fire burns in his chest, not from exhaustion or overworking his lungs, because of his loss, and rage, a deadly combination in his hands. Before he could make it within striking distance of the lexicon, he was interrupted mid-run by a downward arcing blow from a Nexian soldier. Sensing it coming, Richard put his hands above his head. Just as the blow struck a loud concussive shockwave knocked the attacker back. Not pausing for a second, the Nexian, like a coiled cobra, bolted forward with the thrust of his tail. Dodging to the left and rolling up to his feet out of instinct, he threw his hands up, fingers spread apart. Gripping his wrist with his other hand, he felt the sensation of energy traveling up his feet, into his hips, to his core, then his shoulder, flowing through his hand. An explosion of energy rushed out of his hand like a broken dam. Aimed directly at the center mass of the creature, the lance of energy tunneled through his chest and out of his back. Stunned and shocked, Richard couldn't at the moment comprehend what happened, and instead of waste time to reflect upon it, he peered up with a grin at the gaze of Mortimus. Behind him, Dr. Starr and his military team start hammering down on the enemy. Quickly realizing lead bullets are useless against this foe, they dropped them and resorted to the lasers. Once used to mine stone and metal, now fashioned into superb weapons. These prove to be effective. When they don't pierce through the body of the target, they scorch and maim. Laura, running low on energy, throws her gun clattering to the ground, retreating back to the ship, leaving her comrades with a puzzled expression. Continuing the fight on, Dr. Starr's forces are starting to be pushed back. The Edonians, with their best efforts, also remain in a backwards momentum. As the Nexus gather in formation in front of the crowd of desperate onlookers, an electric hum filled the air, followed by a charging up sound. Catching their attention, all eyes focused on a cannon fixed on the Galaxia 1 as it spins into position. Almost nose to nose with the invaders, Lara's voice can be heard over an intercom. "Retreat to your ship immediately or I'll open fire." Ignoring the woman's demands, the horde slithered forward a few more paces. Without a second warning, the cannon let loose, the first from left to right, and then at an angle. Everything the beam touched was utterly evaporated. Burrowing into the ground, the remaining Nexians fled in the direction of the lexicon. It was then Mortimus exited the craft on a wide, riveted ramp. Slithering down to the ground, Mortimus moved with the confidence of a god. Richard was not attempting to regather that energy force from before. He narrows his eyes, lines up his hand with the terrible mask of Mortimus. Poof! Nothing but a hiss echoed across the hard surfaces around them. Statue-like Mortimus stood unflinching.
"You have nothing I fear, human."
At this, anger stirred in Richard's brain, leaping forward recklessly. He was slapped out of the air and bounced twice off the ground, looking up to see a car engine-sized fist flying towards his face. With a skull-shattering impact, Richard was sent flying for hundreds of feet, slamming into the soil before sliding to a halt mid-battlefield. Mortimus dived into the ground like lake water, swimming through the soil and rock, causing a wake of dirt to follow his trail. Bursting from the rubble, arms spread to both sides, Mortimus landed on Richard with a fist to the chest, the impact sinking him into the hard surface. He was shortly greeted by a second punch, followed by another and another, fading in and out of consciousness. Blow after blow, scenes of his existence on Earth flashed before his mind's eye. Through a dented mask and fractured metallic eye sockets, he looked up to see another blow. Mortimus, in his blind rage, he thought to himself, if he let Richard live, he could wait for Ronan to fully integrate with the mask. Then, taking it from his corpse, would grant him the knowledge for the cure. Not to give away this intuition, he continued to rain down blows on Richard, leaving a dented-in broken heap upon the ground. Richard laid lifeless. Suddenly, and without any sign of running, the ground began to rumble. The faces of all participants on this battlefield are puzzled. Before whispers can start making their way around both sides, the world exploded, erecting high into the sky with the grace of a wacky waving arm inflatable tube man. This ancient and revered war beast screeched a bellowing cry that echoed across the planet. Seeing the image of this world-like creature, the Nexians began to flee back to the ship with haste. Terrified this might be one of the children of Ubo Safla, they refused to fight. Mortimus, in disgust and curiosity how things worked in his favor, followed his horde back to the lexicon.
"You have the day, human. I have eternity. No matter how far you go, there is no place in this universe I won't pursue you."
Richard didn't hear a word of this taunt. As quick as they came, they left, roaring one more time in the direction of the craft. The ancient demigod flowed back beneath the war-torn soil, watching the lexicon break through the clouds once more. Dr. Starr and a few soldiers ran over to Richard, panting in exhaustion and unspent adrenaline. Eyes shuddering back open, Richard was back from the shadows that took his mind. For a brief time, he felt like he was being elevated towards the precipice of a monstrous mountain. Upon awakening, his dented mask began to reshape itself, popping back into place. The soldiers dragged him back to Galaxia 1 and straight into the medical bay. Richard fell back into blackness, claimed by sleep once again. Dr. Starr and the shaman took each other's company as a relief. Flooded with an unending list of questions, both began to compare notes of the events that took place. Taking his time and doing his best to explain what war was like, the shaman was dumbfounded by the very concept itself. Kevin's question was more obvious. What was that thing? The Moshai Nagloshi, the shaman replied. In prehistoric times on New Eden, or Edonia in the native tongue, before this race is written language, there was the Wanderers. not sure their origins or how they came to be, with their very first memory of wandering the sands of Eden. Two things were true about these lands. They were ripe with fruit and resources, treacherous and deadly to those without caution. For beneath the surface they strolled upon was the great serpent Moshai Nagloshi. After almost a century of living alongside these deadly creatures, they were found to be benevolent if left alone, only rising to the surface once every 15 years to eat and refill their lungs of nutrition-rich atmosphere. They revered it as an ancient daughter of one of the Old Ones. The Old Ones? I've heard this expression, Kevin interjected. At this, the shaman refused to elaborate, only telling him this: that is not dead, which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die. Confused at this response, with a puzzled expression upon his face, he decided to prod no further. During this conversation, Richard Ronan was in his own mirror house of questions, deep in his unconscious state. Memories flooded back to him, memories of a time after his last deployment, when failing to integrate back into society. Realized his fight wasn't over yet. For the first few months leading up to his re-enlistment, he was filing applications out for the CIA. He tried his best to acclimate to this new lifestyle the best he could. At first, he took up fishing, then jogging. Never truly feeling fulfilled, he watched a documentary one day, a documentary on World War II, and how on one of the Allies' islands they fought on, the soldiers of the area were telling everybody that if they were captured by the American doubles, they will be raped and tortured. None of this was true, of course. Steeped in their beliefs and traditions, they were filled with disbelief by the American propaganda. Under disparity, they began to slay one another. Brother slaying brother, mother slaying child. Those without any help to end their lives were forced to take matters into their own hands, some plunging katanas into their guts, and others leaping from the zenith of high hills. Mothers throwing their kids off the cliff to their death in fear that even worse things would happen to them if they were captured. Seeing this sparked a weird emotion inside of Richard. He thought to himself, there has to be a way to fight against this perception. Even if it doesn't make that big of a difference, I have to try to change that vision of us. Driven to be the best example of what he thought a soldier should be, he decided to take another whack at it from a different angle. Remembering the decision to come on this assignment, he realized that was the last decision he will ever make as a human. While these thoughts played across his imagination, a low, bassy voice spoke from within his mind.
Seek salvation. Flee from thy light. Only in darkness can you be free. Come to me, O child. Come to me.
Yeah, so it's getting there. It's been fun, man. You know what I'm saying? It's super different. It's something outside of music. You know what I'm saying? Because like I love writing music, and music's always gonna be something. That's my number one thing. But sometimes you just gotta give yourself experiments. You know what I'm saying? And just play around or do little writing things, little challenges. And this is gonna be a little bit more than a challenge. I want to make something serious and fun that's entertainment of all sorts. Because I've always been, interested in movies and stuff like that. And I just can't afford to shoot one that people are going to watch. You know what I'm saying? Especially the kind of stuff I'd like to make. So, I have to resort to writing it in story form. And I'm still learning how to do that. I'm not going to, pretend like I'm fucking, some goddamn Twain or whatever. I don't know who the hell to quote, because all of my fucking authors, none of you guys have heard of either. Oh, man, but to be honest with you, you know what I did just take up recently? I had too many people tell me that I would like it if I tried it. So, I said, fuck it. I tried Dune. And you think the movies are long? I think the whole entire story in movie form is like 8 hours long at its longest. That it's ever, because I think it's been a television show, or it's been a movie, a television show, and then they just recently, like a couple years ago, did the first installment to Dune, and they're coming out with another one too soon. But I didn't think I'd like the books because I used to fall asleep all the time to the movies. But I've been getting more interested in just like more complex things. And I don't know. I was on Omegle or something, and I was looking. All of my things said novel, chat, this and this and that. This was all about fucking like looking at books and stuff. And I talked to this one guy forever, and he kept on like bringing up books that I was like, But then he started naming a couple of few that were pretty good, and I was like, yeah, those are pretty solid. And then he was like, yeah, the one I'm reading right now, I didn't think I'd like it. And he said Dune, a trigger word, because literally I've been hearing it like all month. Like I heard Dune like 2 times in these videos where I was trying to find new books to read, to be like grimdark or sci-fi horror, and they'd always like throw Dune in there somehow. And I was like, man, I seen that shit. I'm good. And I don't know, this guy saying it for the 3rd time, 3 times a charm, right? The Trinity, whatever you want to call it, bro. However you want to take that sign. I was like, maybe I'm going to like it. I kind of do. I can't lie, bro. It's different. Like, I don't know. I don't think the movies do it justice at all. This is one of those times where I've, seen the movie and now I'm reading the book, because I've read the book and seen the movie done with Pokemon, the first movie, and Color Out of Space. Those are the ones I remember reading before I saw the movie, and I was pretty thoroughly impressed, but this time I did it backwards. Fucking reading or watching the movie and then reading the book, the movie was kind of boring and it just the characters didn't stand out to me that much. But in the book, it's a lot more complicated. Like the Harkonnen, the fucking Baron, he's a bad motherfucker. He's evil. He's a son of a bitch. And just the way they describe him, like they make him look disgusting in the, not disgusting. They just kind of make him look like really, really obese. But the way they describe him in Dune, he's disgusting. Like his fucking the way his fat lips, the way they describe it is he's got like fat slobbery lips, and he's always stuffing his face with something, and he's got like golden rings on his fingers that are always clinking together, covered in fucking saliva. So it's just like the way they describe him, you just hate the fucking guy, and everything he does is treacherous and horrible, and he does it with confidence and happiness in his voice. So like you're like, oh dude, fuck this guy, bro. And then, you got, like, the prince or whatever. Or not the prince, but, like, the Duke's heir. He's, like, this main character, I guess. And he's a tough little kid, Like, he's not... I think he's, like, 16 or something in the story. And he's, like... He's got a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. And he does have a lot of, like, good, like, strong ability to do things, which is pretty cool. Like, his mother's something called a Bene Gesserit, which is, like, some people call them witches, but they know things. Oh, thank you. You still coloring? But yeah, so I don't know. How do you guys how did you guys take that? I'd like to hear in the comments or let me know what's up. But I think that was a pretty little fun experience. But I have to take care of a couple of things, so I have to sign off. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. Mad love for everybody to stop through here, man. This is really fun. I can't lie. I had fun playing it and hearing it all in order because I've never done that before, and it's fun doing it with you guys present and seeing you guys comment and stuff. So mad love.